They mocked her silence. Sergeant James Mills sneered at Elena Beck, branding her defiance as arrogance, her tattoo as vanity. She stood motionless, no salute, no shot, just the quiet strength that rattled his authority. They thought she was just another recruit. What they didn't know, she was the last surviving Black Viper. A legend buried in classified files. And when she moved fast, silent surgical, his badge hit the floor before his pride did. Stick around. His fall is just the beginning. Let us know where you're watching from and what time you found this. We read every single comment. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. Sergeant James Mills polished his instructor's badge with practiced precision, watching it catch the dawn light streaming through the shooting range windows. 20 years of breaking recruits had taught him exactly how to wield authority. But something about the woman standing motionless at Station 7 made his fingers clench around the metal pin. "I said fire, recruit!" Sergeant James Mills bellowed, his voice echoing across the empty range. The sound of his boots striking the concrete floor punctuated each step as he advanced toward Elena Beck. Her silence felt like a personal insult, the snake tattoo on her neck seeming to mock him with each passing second. The cell phones were already out. 3 junior instructors supposedly monitoring safety protocols were poorly concealing their recording devices. Sergeant James Mills could practically feel the viral moment building, but he couldn't stop now. His authority demanded action. 20 years I've never had a recruit refuse a direct order. He invaded her space, towering over her smaller frame. The snake tattoo was clearer now. Intricate scales that seemed almost alive in the morning light. "You think your Black Viper background makes you special? In my range, you're nothing." Elena Beck's smile never wavered. That's what infuriated Sergeant James Mills most. The absolute serenity in her stance, as if his rage meant nothing at all. "Sir." Colonel Stein's voice cut through the tension. "A word." But Sergeant James Mills wasn't finished. He grabbed Elena's arm, forcing her to face him. "Pick up that weapon," and the movement was liquid grace. One moment he was in control, the next, his arm was twisted, his balance compromised. He caught a glimpse of that snake tattoo blurring past his vision before he found himself staring at the ceiling, his own badge now reflected in Elena's eyes as she stood over him. Silent Snake exploded across base social media within minutes. Sergeant James Mills could hear the muffled snickers, see the phones still recording. His authority, so carefully maintained over 2 decades, wavered like a mirage in desert heat. "Sergeant James Mills." Colonel Stein's voice carried a warning now. "My office, immediately." Climbing to his feet, Sergeant James Mills straightened his uniform fingers, brushing his badge, the symbol of his power that suddenly felt heavier than ever. Something in Colonel Stein's tone, in the way he looked at Elena's tattoo, suggested there were depths here he didn't understand. Alone in the hallway later, Sergeant James Mills stared at his reflection in the polished surface of his badge. 20 years of certainty began to crack. Who was this woman who could stand so silent in the face of his authority? What did that snake tattoo really mean? "Have you ever faced someone who made you question everything you thought you knew?" he whispered to his reflection. Type silent power if you've ever had your authority challenged in ways you never expected. The base buzzed with whispers. Silent Snake trended higher every minute, and Sergeant James Mills felt the first tremors of something he hadn't experienced in decades doubt. Will his iron grip on the shooting range survive this silent challenge? Can 20 years of unquestioned authority stand against a woman who refuses to bend? The answers would shake the very foundation of everything Sergeant James Mills believed about power, respect, and the true meaning of strength. James Mills stared at his reflection in the academy's bathroom mirror, fingers tracing the polished sergeant's badge that had always been his shield of authority. 20 years of service, and never had a trainee gotten under his skin like Elena Beck. Her silence at the range today wasn't just defiance. It carried the weight of something deeper, something that made his chest tighten with unwelcome recognition. "Civilian contractor," he muttered, splashing cold water on his face. The lie in her paperwork tasted bitter. Mills had seen enough special ops personnel to recognize the telltale signs, the economical movement, the way she handled weapons with the intimacy of old friends, the deadness in her eyes when facing targets. Just like Thompson back in '08, before everything went sideways. His phone buzzed, another complaint from the junior instructors about Beck's refusal to demonstrate shooting techniques. "She's undermining the whole program," they said. Mills felt the familiar surge of righteous anger, the same fury that had driven him to break other strong-willed recruits. But this time something held him back. In his office, Mills pulled up Beck's file again, the cursor blinking accusingly on his screen. The background check was perfect, too perfect. Like someone had scrubbed it clean. His mind wandered to that snake tattoo on her wrist, black scales that seemed to shift when she moved. He'd seen that design before in classified briefings about the Black Vipers, an elite unit. So secret, most thought it was just a military urban legend. "Sir," his assistant's voice startled him. "I found those old mission reports you requested. But there's something odd. All mentions of female operatives from 2015 to 2018 have been redacted." Mills dismissed him with a wave, his hands trembling slightly as he opened the folder. The dates aligned perfectly with Beck's employment gaps. Each redaction felt like another brick in a wall of lies he'd helped build a system that valued conformity over truth. The Academy's shooting range echoed with afternoon practice, but Mills couldn't shake the memory of Beck's expression when he'd challenged her earlier. "You're here to teach shooting, not play silent sentinel," he'd snapped. She'd just looked at him, those haunted eyes reflecting his own image back at him, and continued methodically cleaning the weapons. His mentor's words from decades ago surfaced. "Sometimes the strongest soldiers are the ones who know when not to pull the trigger." He'd dismissed it as weakness, then built his career on pushing people past their breaking points. But watching Beck work, seeing the respect she commanded without firing a single shot, forced him to question everything. The badge felt heavier with each passing hour. Mills found himself in the Academy's archives, pulling records of every instructor he'd pushed out for insufficient aggression or failure to demonstrate proper technique. How many other Becks had he driven away, convinced that his way, the old way, was the only path? A news alert popped up on his phone. "Military investigating historical training practices." His heart rate spiked. The article mentioned whistleblowers from special ops units speaking out about forced conformity and suppressed trauma. The comments section blazed with "Amplify, break the silence." When did following orders become more important than protecting our own? Mills whispered to his reflection in the window, watching Beck in the courtyard below, surrounded by admiring students despite, or perhaps because of, her silence. The weight of realization settled like lead in his stomach. He wasn't protecting standards. He was perpetuating a system that valued performance over humanity. Beck's silence wasn't weakness. It was a testament to horrors he'd helped normalize. Type "truth hurts" if you've ever had to question everything you thought you knew. As darkness fell over the Academy, Mills sat alone in his office, his badge laid flat on the desk. Tomorrow he'd have to decide continue pushing for Beck's removal, or finally confront the cracks in the foundation he'd helped build. The sound of distant gunfire from the night training session felt less like pride now, and more like echoes of all the voices he'd helped silence. Sergeant James Mills' fingers traced the polished surface of his instructor's badge, the metal suddenly cold against his skin. The whispers in the mess hall grew louder with each passing minute, a symphony of hushed voices that made his stomach churn. "Black Viper operative," they said. "Unit BV-12. Each word felt like a knife twisting deeper into his gut. The badge that had been his pride, his symbol of authority at the elite shooting academy, now felt heavier than any weight he'd ever carried. Sergeant James Mills couldn't stop his hand from trembling as he remembered how he'd stood there just hours ago, mocking Elena Beck's silence at the range. The memory of his own voice dripping with condescension echoed in his mind. "Too good to show us your skills, recruit." The truth about her tattoo slammed into him like a physical blow. 12 intertwined snakes. Not some fancy decoration, as he'd smugly assumed, but a memorial. 12 brothers and sisters in arms, their lives forever etched into her skin. Sergeant James Mills felt the cold sweat breaking out across his forehead as more details emerged through the grapevine. "She was the only one who made it out," a fellow instructor whispered, avoiding Sergeant James Mills's gaze. "That mission in Kandahar, it was classified until now." The shooting range, usually alive with the crack of gunfire, stood eerily silent. Sergeant James Mills walked between the empty lanes, the wind whistling through the target sheets like ghostly whispers of judgment. His footsteps echoed hollowly against the concrete, each step a reminder of his morning's arrogance. His phone buzzed. Another notification. The story was spreading beyond the academy walls. Black Viper Truth was trending, and with it clips of his morning confrontation with Elena. His words, his sneering face played back for the world to see. Sergeant James Mills watched himself on the small screen, a stranger wearing his uniform embodying everything he'd sworn to stand against when he first pinned on this badge. The weight of realization crushed down on him. While he'd been teaching proper stance and trigger discipline, she'd been carrying the weight of real combat, real loss. Every silent moment at the range wasn't defiance. It was respect for the fallen. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the range, Sergeant James Mills found himself standing at the lane where Elena had stood. The target sheet fluttered in the wind, clean, untouched, yet somehow more powerful than any bullseye he'd ever seen. Her silence had spoken volumes, and he'd been too blind to listen. The badge on his chest caught the fading light, reflecting a truth he couldn't escape. He wasn't just facing a PR nightmare or a disciplinary hearing. He was facing the gulf between what he'd thought he knew about service and sacrifice, and the reality embodied in Elena's quiet dignity. Type silence speaks if you've ever misjudged someone's strength. The day wasn't over, but Sergeant James Mills could feel his carefully constructed world crumbling. As more details about Unit BV-12 emerged, each revelation felt like another brick falling from the walls of his certainty. The wind picked up, whistling through the empty range like a requiem for his pride, carrying with it the weight of 12 fallen warriors and one survivor who'd shown more courage in her silence than he had in all his years of shouting commands. Officer James Mills gripped his instructor's badge tighter, watching Elena Beck approach the firing range for the final qualification test. The afternoon sun beats down on the academy grounds, highlighting the snake tattoo coiling up her right arm, a mark he'd dismissed as mere decoration hours ago. Now it seems to mock his earlier arrogance. The whispers ripple through the gathered crowd as Elena methodically checks her rifle. Mills's earlier boasts about real soldiers and proper technique echo hollowly in his mind. The base's security cameras are rolling phones raised high, all waiting for the moment he's certain will vindicate his prejudices. "Whenever you're ready, recruit!" Mills calls out, unable to keep the condescension from his voice. His hand unconsciously touches the polished badge that has defined his identity for 15 years. The badge that gave him the authority to question her presence here, to doubt her capabilities, to dismiss her service record. Elena shoulders the rifle with fluid grace. The first shot cracks through the air like thunder, followed by another and another. Mills's jaw slackens as he watches each bullet find its mark with devastating precision. No wasted movement, no flashy displays, just the quiet efficiency of someone who has lived this, breathed this, survived this. Black Viper Strike starts trending within minutes. The videos spread like wildfire across YouTube, showing not just her performance, but his earlier dismissive comments. His phone buzzes incessantly with notifications, each one a reminder of his misjudgment. The best shot, Elena says softly, lowering her rifle, is the one no one remembers, because in real combat, Sergeant Mills' showmanship gets people killed. Mills stares at his badge, seeing it differently now. All these years teaching flash and flare, while true warfare, the kind Elena knows, demands something else entirely. The snake tattoo catches the light as she turns to leave, and he finally understands its significance. Not decoration, but dedication. Not show, but survival. Have you ever had your entire worldview shattered in a single moment? Type yes if Elena's demonstration changed your perspective too. As the sun sets over the academy, Sergeant James Mills walks alone across the empty range. His badge feels heavier than ever before, weighted with the realization that he's been teaching theatrics while dismissing true warriors. The viral videos continue to spread, but it's her quiet words that echo in his mind, reshaping everything he thought he knew about service, skill, and sacrifice. The next generation of recruits will learn differently. Sergeant James Mills will teach differently. Because sometimes the loudest lessons come in the quietest moments, and the greatest warriors aren't always the ones who shout the loudest. Sergeant James Mills stares at his reflection in the polished surface of his instructor's badge, the same badge that had given him unquestioned authority for 2 decades at the elite shooting academy. The setting sun streaming through his office window catches the metal, creating a blinding glare that makes him squint. Much like his own blindness had made him unable to see the truth until now. His fingers trace the outline of Elena Beck's personnel file, the pages dog-eared from his obsessive reading over the past 24 hours. The former Black Viper operative's evaluation forms tell a story so different from what he'd assumed. Perfect scores, flawless technique. But it's her written observations about each fellow recruit that stop his breath. Insights so profound, they make his decades of instruction feel hollow. 20 years of measuring worth by how loud someone could shout, how aggressive they could be. Sergeant James Mills whispers to his empty office, his voice catching. The badge feels heavier than ever in his palm. And she taught more with her silence than I ever did with my thunder. The viral video from yesterday's confrontation plays on his computer screen, Mills learns still trending. He doesn't pause it this time, forcing himself to watch as he towers over Elena, demanding she prove herself, while she simply stands there, snake tattoo visible, weapon lowered. The comments below are brutal. This is what toxic leadership looks like, and time for the old guard to learn new tricks. Sergeant James Mills rises slowly, walking to the range where it all happened. Shell casings from yesterday's session still litter the ground. He kneels, picking one up, remembering how he'd mistaken Elena's measured restraint for weakness. The empty casing burns cold in his palm, like the cold truth he'd been forced to face. "You were right, Elena." Sergeant James Mills speaks into the empty range, his voice echoing off the barriers. "True courage isn't about domination. It's about knowing when not to pull the trigger." The badge catches the last rays of sunlight as he removes it completely. Tomorrow it will return to his chest, but its weight will carry a different meaning. His hand trembles slightly as he places it on his desk next to Elena's final report, the one recommending comprehensive changes to the Academy's training philosophy. Type growth, if you've ever had to admit you were wrong, appears as text across the screen, followed by share this video to show that even the strongest leaders must sometimes learn to follow. Sergeant James Mills takes one last look at the range before locking up. The snake tattoo that had first triggered his prejudice now seems like a symbol of transformation, shedding old skin for new understanding. Tomorrow he'll walk back through these doors not just as an instructor, but as a student of a deeper kind of strength. Sometimes, Sergeant James Mills reflects his voice barely above a whisper. Our greatest victories come not from standing our ground, but from having the courage to move from it. The security lights flicker on automatically as darkness falls, casting long shadows across the range. Sergeant James Mills's badge sits alone on his desk, its surface reflecting not just rank and authority now, but the humble gleam of hard-earned wisdom. Share this story if you believe true strength lies in the courage to change. Drop a 1 in the comments if you've experienced a moment that transformed your understanding of power. The empty range stands as a testament to his transformation, each target a reminder that the most important battles are often fought within ourselves. Tomorrow, Sergeant James Mills will pin that badge back on, but he'll wear it with a new understanding, one that honors not just the power to teach, but the humility to learn.